Kremlin releases video of Putin attempting to reassign Russian president as conservative with young admirer. The Russia-Ukraine war has entered its second year, and the country's president, Vladimir Putin, is responsible for the death and destruction. On Tuesday, amid international condemnation of the conflict, the Kremlin released a video that appears to show the leader's care and concern. In the video, President Putin and an 8-year-old Russian girl asked Finance Minister Anton Siluanov for the allocation of funds. The video, released after a brief protest last month, also sought to show that Putin was still in power, according to Reuters. A strange call. In the video released by the Kremlin, Putin is seen welcoming his 8-year-old daughter, Rysat Okipova. Among them is a strange call from a boy who asked the finance minister of Russia for funds for his land in Dagestan, in the North Caucasus region. At first, Anton Siluanov appeared confused by the girl's request and did not respond to her greetings, Reuters reported. However, he immediately agreed to give another 5 billion rubles to his city in the south of Russia. Chapter. The President of Russia responds. Then he told the girl, "We have prepared 5 billion rubles for Dagestan." 5 billion rubles is equal to $55.6 million. A similar phone call was made to Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin. The video shows Putin smiling broadly during the conversation. Then, at the time of the Russian president, the little girl thanked Siluanov with flowers. Reuters reported that Putin told Lesat that he had invited Lesat and his family to Moscow, because he was disturbed by pictures of him crying when the leader failed to meet him during a trip to Dagestan. Rebuild trust or save reputation. The little girl's visit comes after Putin's visit to Dagestan, where he joined a large crowd last week. The Kremlin cited this as proof of the inspiring nationwide support of the Russian president, just days after the removal of the mercenary group Wagner made the headlines. The revolt was a warning of the risk of war in Russia. Vladimir Putin's darkest battle was fought by a private army led by Russia's elite, but after the coup failed, the president was faced with the fact that they would surely betray him. The failed coup on Saturday, led by the leader of the Wagnerian mercenary group, was seen as one of the biggest challenges to keeping the Russian president in power for years. Even before this attack, the Kremlin tried to bring many workers back under state control, but this is a difficult network to unravel. Russia has been promoting the cooperation of special forces operating in regions such as Ukraine, the Middle East and Africa for many years as a way to expand its influence. Russian mercenaries have been an important part of Russian policy, especially foreign policy, for some time now, said Christopher Faulkner, an assistant professor at the U.S. Naval Academy for ABC News. The idea behind this is deceptive bias. This group is letting Russia go to a point where they don't want to break the law, but test the water in a different way. How many? Dr. Faulkner, who studied general education, said that private military companies were supported by the Russian state at that time. It's usually a good feeling, he said. It is estimated that more than 50,000 Russian soldiers will serve in Ukraine. It is technically illegal to have a private army in Russia, So the people who lead them are usually specially selected by the Kremlin, and then orders and services are given. Some of these new agencies were created directly by the Russian government, and there does not seem to be any real difference between them and the Ministry of Defense, said Mr. Faulkner. But now Moscow has to deal with a heavy army turning against it. The President of Russia is now working hard to ensure that this does not happen again. Faulkner said Putin had no choice but to resort to Ukraine's private army. This is a place that can be conveniently used to keep the nerves of the Russian Ministry of Defense and give them time to manage and fix the problems they face, he said. A way to deal with the conflict without having to call for internal unity, which could upset the Russians. They are stable enough until Wagner became the most professional of special military divisions, participated in some wars in Ukraine, including the Battle of Bakhmut. The leader of the group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, is known worldwide as a group leader. Once part of the Russian president's inner circle, he is sometimes referred to as Putin's chef, as he has been involved with Kremlin cuisine for years. Wagner is believed to have been created in 2014 by Mr. Prigozhin and former Russian police officer Dmitry Utkin. They hired former Russian intelligence officers or former MOD officials. They have real intelligence, said Mr. Faulkner. The organization brought good results to Moscow from the very beginning. These groups are a very useful way for the Russian government to sell products to unsafe areas, especially rebel groups, Faulkner said. And smart people will help you? As Putin's candidacy rises, the Russians attack him. The secret camp where the military hides from Moscow's skirmish attack to foil Putin's plans and help Ukraine win the war. A man seems to be thinking about the left side of the frame. He was standing in what looked like a camp, dressed in military uniform. Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea from Ukraine in 2014 is a pivotal moment for the group, which is said to have played a key role. I think that's probably one of the main reasons why the Kremlin trusts this conflict. They have experience, said Mr. Faulkner. But we see their strength weakening as the war continues. In 2022, the Wagner model changed to meet the needs of the front line. He enlisted many inexperienced prisoners as soldiers. The United States estimated in January that there were 50,000 Wagner mercenaries in Ukraine, about 80% of whom were recruited from prisons. The prisoners used in the war were described by the Ukrainian military as cannon fodder, meaning death work. White House National Security Advisor John Kirby said at the time that Wagner is committing crimes against humanity and human rights abuses in Ukraine and elsewhere. Wagner got too big and usurped the Russian army. Putin says the Kremlin has paid more than $1 billion from the Ministry of Defense and state budget to support Wagner in Ukraine. Wagner has basic rights, freedom, power and guns, but he's going to be a little big now, said Mr. Faulkner.